Welcome to the Cabin Culture Podcast, where we spend a little more time diving deeper into all the fun parts of cabin culture. We like to think of this as both the material and imagined expressions of how cabin lovers, dwellers, builders, and designers wish to live a more simple and authentic life. Today we're sitting down with Mike Girard, co-owner of the Kingfield Chalet near Sugarloaf Mountain in Maine. Mike will take us through the journey of discovering and purchasing their dream cabin, how they've made it both a family getaway and a successful rental property, and how he balances running the chalet with his outdoor sports, sales, and events business. Mike also shares how sustainability has shaped the choices they've made for the cabin and why going eco-friendly is both rewarding and practical. If you're interested in finding the right balance between cabin life, hosting, and making your space more eco-conscious, this episode is packed with valuable insights. Let's do it. Okay, let's back up a little bit, and I'm going to ask you first to introduce yourself and start with what you do in the real world, so where you spend like 90% of your time, and then we'll move to your cabin and that kind of escape for you all and what you've created there.
Totally. Yeah, so my name's Mike Girard. My wife, Kyle Bonus, and I own the Kingfield Chalet, but yes, our real jobs are, we live in Portland, Maine. I run a small outdoor sports, so ski, snowboard, climbing, skateboard, sales and events agency, which I've been in that industry for a long time. So little business I run.
Wait, can I ask one question about that?
Yes.
What do you mean by sales and events agency?
Okay,
I'm interested in a lot of those sports you mentioned.
Yeah. So sales is the more profitable side of it, my like day job, which I'd say the events supplement. But basically, a sales agency in our industry is your 1099, like contractor-based outside sales agency, which means you're in charge of sales for a specific territory in the wholesale channel. So I don't sell to end consumers. It's like, imagine any ski shop, snowboard shop, climbing shop. Some are like ski resorts with uniform or retail business, but anyone who's buying it in bulk, wholesale, to then resell or use as uniforms in the New England territory, all 6 states, I'm like the exclusive agency.
And for a brand, or do you represent multiple brands?
Multiple brands. So that's because it's not in-house. It's an agency-based model, which means like contractor basis. So I work for Mammut, I work for Jones Snowboards, and a couple other smaller brands. As long as they're not like direct competitors, it works. It would be weird to have an agency with like multiple of the exact same brand.
Right. Well, it would be confusing to know which to push. Like,
it's like
the same thing.
Yeah, this one's better than that, but I also sell that one too. And like, it's so most successful agencies have like a few marquee brands that are most of their business, and then sometimes you have accessories or other stuff to fill it in.
Okay.
Mammut makes everything, climbing ropes, avalanche safety, fancy apparel. Jones is more snowboard hard goods, split boards, backcountry gear, and outerwear.
Okay.
And
are you from Maine originally?
No, I grew up in Central Mass.
Okay.
Yeah, went to a few summers of summer camp in Maine for a few weeks, which kind of like introduced me to a lot of the hobbies I still have now, which is cool. My mom, her family had like a long tradition of working at a summer camp, like for diabetic kids in Ferry Beach. Some like Maine connections, but no Maine childhood roots besides that.
Yeah, but once you go up there and you realize like this really is the way life should be, then it becomes of like addicting.
Totally. And then my wife, Kyle, she, we met when we were both living in Boston. She has, since I've known her, worked in the sustainability space in one form or another. Used to be with the bike share in Boston, and then now she's a consultant with her office is all focused on green energy, and whether it's like the utility space or a lot of renewable energy, states that are trying to improve their overall green credentials, all that stuff. So those are our real jobs.
Which I wanted to start with. We don't always start there, but in
Hmm.
your case, it feels like your literal marriage has also created a marriage that makes a lot of sense for your particular cabin, both where it's located
Yeah.
and then the style of it. So tell us about the Kingfield Chalet, where it is for those outside of Maine who might be unfamiliar. Just give us like the setting of it, and then tell us a little bit more about the actual cabin, because I think that's one of the things that makes it pretty unique.
Yeah. So it's in Kingfield, Maine, which is on Route 27, which is the main road, really the only road that goes from Point South to Sugarloaf Mountain. Sugarloaf is our big, awesome ski resort, mountain biking, hiking destination. It's very close to the Bigelows, which is an awesome mountain range where, the Appalachian Trail also runs through, and Flagstaff Lake is just beyond that. So lots of natural beauty. We're just under 20 minutes from Sugarloaf, like door to parking lot, getting your boots on, which to us felt like the perfect match to us, we consider it a ski house because it's really close to Sugarloaf.
Yeah.
But in the eyes of an appraiser, it doesn't appraise like a ski house, thankfully, because we, didn't have that in the budget.
Hmm.
And it also means instead of being on mountain kind of marooned, if you want to do real world stuff, it's like we're
Yeah.
2 minutes from the grocery store, 2 minutes from the hardware and lumber supply store. And it's directly on our drive. If we were going to drive from Portland to Sugarloaf, it's on the drive.
Mm.
So kind of
So it makes
shortens the
that
trip.
drive 20 minutes shorter.
Yes, which
Which
is
actually matters if you want to go regularly. That 20 minutes is not insignificant, I've learned when traveling to the mountains here.
totally.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. Can you describe? So I grew up skiing at Sugarloaf. My uncle has been on ski patrol as long as I can remember. So is my cousin. And every car in our family has a Sugarloaf sticker on it. So whenever
yes,
we get a new one, he literally pulls out one and goes, "Here you go for your new car." And he actually is weirdly particular about the old school ones that say Sugarloaf
slash
USA, I
USA.
think.
Yeah. Yep.
Yes, versus the ones that exist now. So I have a deep understanding of this mountain, but for those like outside of Maine, like just give a little personality to Sugarloaf as a ski place and as kind of a community.
Yeah. Sugarloaf is the place that everyone uh, that hasn't been caught by the dragnet of Loon and Sunday River, those absorb a lot of the people who are driving from points south, from cities, flatlands, whatever, and want a slightly more doable drive at a still reasonable big mountain.
Mhm.
But we love Sugarloaf because it's in the middle of nowhere. It's big, it's steep, it has above tree line lift access skiing. It's kind of more old school. The vibe is definitely more rural. There are some fancy polishes because it is like a corporate owned resort, but there's definitely a lot of the old school flair. And it's like, yeah, if you want tight trees, steep fall line trails, like you don't mind it being ridiculously cold and windy and kind of miserable at times. It's sort of like the Cannon Mountain of Maine, but a bit bigger and a bit more. There are like actual creature comforts.
So like a tough, rugged Mainer would love it there. It's like
Absolutely.
made for people who live and love Maine.
Yeah, it seems like one of the few that still has like the devout local hardcore following.
Yeah.
People with Maine accents so thick you like can hardly understand them. Commingling with the people who have an icon pass and they've already done their 5 days at Sunday River and they're like venturing out to try something different.
Yeah.
So it seems to cater to both crowds really well.
Yeah, it reminded me. So I honestly haven't skied many places besides Sugarloaf. I grew up in Pennsylvania, so I skied ski round top, but then Sugarloaf was the only other place I really skied. And we went out west this past winter and we went to Jackson Hole for a day and then we went to Grand Targhee. And when we went to Grand Targhee, I was like, oh, this reminds me of Sugarloaf. It's like
Yeah.
the local version with like amazing skiing, beautiful views, but compared to Jackson Hole, which I really didn't enjoy as much because I'm used to more of that small, not small, but like community feel at a ski place versus now Grand Targhee is definitively smaller than Jackson
Hmm.
Hole. But that's how I feel about Sugarloaf. It just feels like a lot of the people there are season pass holders, are part of the community. The folks on ski patrol have been
Yes.
on ski patrol for years and years and all know each other.
Yeah. And not only that, like we for my bachelor party, we did a really cool canoe, like a shuttled, very long river canoe trip. and the outfitter who shuttled us is like his son is one of the longtime ski patrollers. They're just like deeply ingrained. They do the backwoods Maine stuff in the summer. They, like, my wife Kyle and I kind of did a dry run of that trip just to make sure I wasn't taking my friends into like to die in the the backwoods of Maine, like make sure I know where we're going.
Yes.
And yeah, we show up and the ski patroller, it turns out, we found out later, he's a ski patroller here, but we like paddled to their dock. He and his sister are like shooting frogs off of the rocks and grilling them up and offered us some. And they're like, it's just, which we ate. It was actually pretty good. And then, paddled our canoe for the next 3 days. And so really cool, kind of salt of the earth people who choose to work at Sugarloaf, because it is really a rad place and the only kind of big mountain skiing and snowboarding in the area.
Yeah. I want to talk about the physical cabin, but I want to ask something first, because we went through the opposite of this when we bought land in Freeport. Honestly, the reason I started an Instagram account for the cabin was because I was worried about the off season. I was like, I know that summer and fall, we will be able to get visitors at the cabin, but I'm not as clear about the winter in Freeport. And then we also had looked at property in Sugarloaf, but the flip side of that, we were like, well, I know we can get guests in the winter time, but what about the summer and fall? Can you speak to the seasonality of where you're located, and does it exist, or is there something year round, or how do you play with that to use your place? Because you all host it as well. Like, how has that played out for you in terms of off season, especially since you all like snowboarding? And the high season is when you also want to be spending time there. And I feel the same way about summer. We just don't go in the summer because that's when everyone wants to go. So how do you play with that?
Yes. So we fully came into it expecting winter to be the only kind of like lucrative season. And also expected that moral conflict of like, do we block it for ourselves? Do we rent it out? How do we choose when to do which? We were very pleasantly surprised that summer got booked almost as much as winter. We couldn't price it quite the same, but there's a lot of people who are on summer vacation, whether they have kids or they're traveling, or, we get kind of hobby blinded where we just assume everyone mountain bikes and snowboards and totally forget that normal people hike, and there's amazing hiking, and that there's canoeing and all this other awesome stuff that we maybe discount because we don't do it as much. But there are more of those people than there are psychos who like to crash mountain bikes. So we found there to be a really stable 3 or 4 summer months, maybe 2 to 3 summer months, and then 3 or 4 winter months with some shoulder season that's quieter. But fortunately, the current shoulder season has been well booked because fall is still beautiful. There is foliage. Yeah. There's still great hiking and biking. And then mud season, April, May is probably the quietest, but we can really enjoy coming up. There's usually by then a lot of bigger tasks. And honestly, the snow is still really good in April and May. Yeah. And the mountain's not crowded. So
plus Reggae Fest
is incredible. Yeah. So we do try to make sure to not get totally we did buy this to be our snowboard ski house. So we don't want to ever skip an entire winter season. So we just have to pick methodically, when are we free? Let's block those off now, so we don't have the temptation of a booking coming in and being like, ooh, should we take it? Because for sure the first winter we left calendar wide open, everything got booked, and multiple times we're like, damn, we would like to go, but we can't. We're not going to cancel a booking. So
right. How do you handle that now? Do you open it seasonally, or do you just intentionally block days for yourself?
Both. We only open a season at a time. So we just open winter. We have certain dates we'll block that we know we're going, and then if there are still openings and there's snow coming, will come up. And luckily, because it is a lot of weekend trippers, a lot of times even peak season, there will be midweek days that we can come and enjoy a less crowded mountain and not really be missing out on much dollars wise if it's midweek. Might not have been booked anyways.
Right, right. Okay, let's go back to the start of the hosting journey for you, because you all are
Yeah.
pretty young. And I often think about this of how our generation has been able to purchase second homes a lot earlier than, like, my uncle built his own place up at Sugarloaf with my grandpa. And actually, now that I think about it, he was probably my age, but it feels like he was older. Like, I feel
Yeah.
like
Based
I'm
on the
younger
life
than he is.
expectancy, maybe it was,
Right.
yeah.
Right. And that is because of Airbnb. So talk me through your decision process when you went from like taking day trips up or renting places to snowboard to like, maybe we should invest in our own place, and like what made that possible for you at the time that you did.
Yeah. I mean, we are, I'd say, atypical. We don't really own a proper primary home. Like, and in the current market, we really want to be in Portland, and buying a big single family or any single family anywhere near the peninsula is expensive. And
Yeah.
luckily, Kyle and I share the same kind of like business mindset. I've run my own companies since I had a landscaping company during college summers, and I didn't really talk about the events company, but that started after my freshman year of college, hosting a skate festival, which branched out into other events, but just kind of always had the affliction of entrepreneurship, if you will,
Yeah.
like can't really help it. And Kyle's super money savvy and motivated as well. So we were like, we'd really like to be able to go, and we dreamt of having a mountain house, each of us, like our whole lives. My family didn't have that growing up, and it just always felt like something that would be really special, and could be like a generational awesome thing to have in our family.
Yeah. So
So
you both were on the same page about that very early in your relationship.
yes, we weren't even
Yeah.
married. I mean, this was a year and a half before we got married. And we had actually already bought a multi-unit in Portland, because also being just like trying to be financially savvy, we figured if we can buy the multi-unit we were living in, we had both saved as much money as we could, and now live in the same unit we moved in as renters, but own the building. And then it was like, okay, well, this is if we have a next opportunity, we definitely want somewhere that we'd like to escape to and do our favorite activities. So super atypical. Yeah. Went in, as we joked, we were business partners, not, life partners yet. We certainly felt like life partners, but that was
Right.
like years before marriage. We got the spot in Portland, and then still before being married, the vacation home. And maybe someday we'll buy a proper primary residence.
When the time is right.
Yeah, right.
That's what's interesting is I feel like back in the day, like there were some people whose job title would be like real estate investor. I don't even really
Right.
know what that means. But with our generation, I feel like, and this is just my perspective, but I feel like that isn't a thing as much as people who are just entrepreneurial minded and are like,
Mm-hmm.
wait, I see a way to kind of hack the system. It isn't necessarily let me amass like massive wealth doing this, or maybe there are people out there doing that. It's just not my community. Instead, it's people
Yeah,
who are like, I love this place or this outdoor sport or whatever. And so how do I hack this system and get to do more of this, right? Or how do I hack the system and buy myself more flexibility in my life by owning a couple rentals like this?
totally. Yeah. And yeah, I absolutely don't see a way that you could just be, maybe it's possible, but like real estate investor, like I don't think we think of ourselves as that, because like you said, it's just like, how can we more affordably live in Portland and have like, it's sort of more of a team effort rather than like what we could afford to do on our own in a single family,
Right.
where you really don't necessarily benefit until the day the mortgage is paid off or when you sell it. And then same thing here. And we had the tough conversation, like we're really interested in this property. Offers are due in a few days. Kyle hadn't seen it yet in person. And there was no previous short-term rental history here. It was just personal use. And like, how much are we willing to pay out of pocket per month? Because we never went into it being like, this is going to be a profitable Airbnb. This is something we're buying purely as a business opportunity. It's like, here's our dream house that maybe we can offset some of the cost as like a hack,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I can also relate. You run your own business and I run my
Hmm.
own business, which makes sense, right? That entrepreneurial mind doesn't just apply in one area of your life.
Hmm.
So I feel like a lot of people who have rentals also run their own business, but that introduces an element of uncertainty in terms of your income, right? And after you've been doing it long enough, you can begin to see trends and you're like, okay, on average, this is about how we do. But when COVID hit, it was this sudden shakeup for anyone who runs their own business. I don't know if you experienced it in the same way that I did, but it was like suddenly all income stops flowing, right? And someone during that time described it to me as like, okay, you need to think about your business as like a table, right? And if you only have one leg or one revenue
Hmm.
stream, that's a very unsteady table. And as soon as that gets cut off, like you're done, right? And so the more legs you can put on the table, the more stability you introduce. And so at that time, I had one rental and a business. Both of those legs got cut off. So there was still
Hmm.
instability. And so I think all the time now about like in terms of my life, but my business, which has some instability, and then the rentals, we have one long-term rental that has more
Hmm.
stability than a
Hmm.
short-term rental. If a hurricane hits, which it did this past week, right? That one's all of a sudden removed for however long. So then how do the other ones help hold you up? And I feel like if you have a full-time job, there's a little bit less of that. If you're W-2, you have that consistent income. And so this can be just like nice bonus money, which everyone runs their Airbnb differently, but
Yeah,
and
and
thinking
that's
about that entrepreneurial side of it.
totally, yeah. That's sort of, I think, the stability of the long-term rentals in Portland, and that's our where we live. So that had the like, we try to be awesome landlords, and we have people who've been in the building anywhere from 5 to 10 years, 10 plus, who we don't think are going anywhere. We try and take good care of. So it's like
Yeah.
that's stable. This is something that we didn't need to bake in a cash flow expectation beyond, like, hopefully there's some help, and
Yeah.
then best case scenario, it's profitable, and then we can reinvest into it. I'm self-employed, so my schedule goes from, like, it's about to be absolutely bananas, which does help take away the temptation or the frustration of not being able to come up all the time,
Yeah.
because I am like fully absent during trade show, on snow demo, and like event season. I host a split board festival and a backcountry night, and then we just have the gauntlet of like all those dealers that I mentioned that need to be trained on the new product, met with at the trade shows, testing the gear at on snow demos. So there are times of the year that I am super busy, and then times where I have more free time where I can do house projects either in Portland or here. Whereas Kyle has the W-2 stability. She's an awesome partner. She's down with the financial, risk, and very savvy with what kind of investments we should make together. But yeah, she's up on a meeting right now with her more predictable W-2 job.
Yes.
So
That's
it's a
that's
good
the
combo.
dream.
Hmm.
Like think about how much stability you've built in there with all four of those long-term
Hmm.
rentals, short-term rentals, your flexibility of your job, but also,
Hmm.
when you're an entrepreneur, the advantage is you can also potentially, the dream is make more money because you have complete
Right.
control over it. And then a W-2, which is so predictable. I always wonder when I hear people going all in on short-term rentals and just building and then leaving their jobs and doing that full time. Total respect for that. And Sean was able to leave his job because of our short-term rentals and he
Hmm.
does more work on them. But that means when something like a hurricane hits or whatever, all of a sudden your ability to just refund everyone or whatever you might need to do goes away because you're actually relying on that income to pay not just that mortgage but your life mortgage. It just introduces a lot more anxiety. Maybe it's
Totally.
just because
Yeah.
I'm anxious, but
No, I think that's fair. I mean, I think a lot of people get pretty leveraged, and I think it's easy to justify the leverage when everything's awesome and vacation travel's up. There's no pandemic, life is good. But anything from like a credit crunch from high interest rates, or
Mhm.
natural disaster, pandemic, any of those
Yep.
can really put a serious dent. And then if you have that leverage and you owe all those mortgage
Mhm.
payables, and your collateral is all your other properties, it starts to look and sound pretty scary.
Yeah.
So I think we're like willing to take risks, but like very calculated. And right now our version of risk is like, maybe we can build another small structure, even tinier house at the foot of the property, because we have just under 4 acres. The other end of it is all the way down by the road, and maybe that would allow us to come and stay when the chalet is rented, or to host bigger groups with a kind of backup spillover. Maybe build like a cool wood-fired sauna, but kind of more like incremental, rather than like, all right, we can qualify for this amount of total debt. Let's go like hoover up some properties. That's definitely not our model.
Right. I have gone all across the spectrum, not the hoover up the properties. I love that description. I haven't gone the hoover direction, but I'm a dreamer. So I have gone every, like, oh, should we go all in on a bigger property with multiple, or should we build another one like Cozy Rock, or should we, right? Like all over. And then I think I'm really in a season right now of dreaming and then forcing myself to say no. Instead of my instinct is always like, yes, let's do the next one. But at this point, I'm like exercising that muscle of like, what does it look like to say no to the dreamer in favor of the stability?
Well, and you also have, it sounds like a good team dynamic where I bet you're dreaming, if Sean, especially if he's up against like a huge miserable project, can like, if you ask him fresh after like a massive physical labor uphill project, he might have a different opinion about like wanting to also do it again at another bigger property, like that reality check.
Right. Yeah. If you're dreaming about a cabin build, or are in the midst of a build, or you just bought a place and are getting ready to host for the very first time, regardless of where you are, sometimes you just need a little help along the way. Shared experiences from someone who's been there, advice from someone who's learned a lot of lessons the hard way. That's me. Or a cheerleader as you finish up. All of these reasons are exactly why I started offering cabin consultations to our Instagram followers and friends who could use some specific one-on-one help. I can't promise to solve all your problems, but I can promise to be transparent about our build costs and process, our organization and project management systems, our favorite and least favorite tools for renting, how we market, and how we found ourselves with almost 80,000 Instagram followers and 100% occupancy in our first year of hosting at Cozy Rock. So if that sounds like it might help you, feel free to visit us at staycozycabin.com or on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin and sign up for a time to chat there. Let's go back to when you first bought this one. What did the search, because you didn't build, which I love, because we talked to a lot of folks who built and we talked through the building process, but you all didn't. So that house buying or the cabin buying process looks a little bit different. How did that start for you? How long did it take you to find this one?
Yeah, so it was a really interesting start. One of my close friends, our close friends in Portland, just like I don't think we had said like, we're trying to buy a ski house. He just saw on his Instagram algorithm this account that's like cool cabins. And one of them was I think in New Portland, Maine, which is it's much closer to Kingfield. It's like 2 towns away from us here in Kingfield.
Yeah.
Cool spot, super cheap, which was like, oh my God, how is this possible?
Yeah.
Super off grid, like impossible to access without like an ATV, no running water, no electricity, but like got our brains just like, we were serious enough, at least curious enough to reach out and got in touch with the listing agent who was a real person. Honestly, we thought is this a scam? This doesn't even seem real.
We found it on Instagram.
We found it on Instagram. Are you a real person?
Yeah.
Are you trying to get me to pay a down payment like over the phone? She was very real and ended up becoming our agent in our eventual search. So it's not like we started in earnest that day, but that's what got us like, man, we really should. We've talked about wanting to have a spot near Sugarloaf. Like, let's look into it. So we had that agent. Then like we signed an agreement, she was going to represent us in our search. We had an MLS feed that was basically within 30 minutes of Sugarloaf and within a certain budget. And it was a low budget. So like we were getting, we would just get stuff that would pop up in the feed every once in a while. And it would be like beat down, needs a ton of work, kind of far, whatever. But, and we never super seriously looked at any of those. and we were getting a little bit dispirited. And then Kyle was out visiting her mom in Colorado, and just like was like, I'm just gonna search Zillow like near. This was early winter. I think
You did this or
December.
Kyle did this?
Kyle, she was just, I don't know what inspired her. I'm very thankful she decided to look this day. She was like, Zillow, homes near Sugarloaf. And this place had been listed, and it was outside of our budget. So that's why it didn't show up.
Yeah.
But the budget we set was like low. Like we could afford a bit more than we had. We were just trying to keep it constrained.
Yep.
Um,
And by the time the ones in that budget, by the time you put work into them, it's probably looking about the same as this one. Yeah.
That's the thing. They all needed a ton of work. So
right.
This one showed up, and it was like pretty beautiful. I mean, thankfully for us, they listed it midwinter. They had bad photos, like the things that maybe helped us because we could tell the potential. Mm-hmm. And it was like, I need to get on the phone and in the car like right now.
Yeah.
This just got listed at offers are due in 5 days. Drove up, and like immediately, as soon as I walked in, FaceTime Kyle. I was like, this place is perfect. This is insane. We need to put an offer in, and came up with an offer. I think there were 4 others, but
that sounds so stressful to me.
It was intense, but there were enough. Like there was a Protect Our Winters sticker on the side of the fridge, which is a nonprofit that the company that I work for, Jones Snowboards, the founder of Jones is the founder of Protect Our Winters, like a sustainability based nonprofit focused on winter sports. There were a few things that were cues that the owners clearly, the artwork was ski and Sugarloaf focused. So we knew that they like ski there, care about the environment. And just felt like maybe we're more aligned than the person who, like the Mercedes with New York plates, who was driving out of the driveway, also looking at, it's like, I feel like
you're like, how do we let them know?
Yeah. So we did, like write a letter, which we're like, we know you're not obliged or maybe even allowed to pass this along, but like if the sellers are interested, like we'd like to express why we think this is so special. This is who we are. We care about it. And we knew that, they had designed it to be super energy efficient, full poured insulated foundation, that all the exterior siding, the posts and beams are all from trees felled on the property.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. They like really designed it in a way that spoke to us, and that we felt really good about the eco kind of credentials. So we wrote a little letter, put an offer in. We thought it was a pretty strong offer. And then they accepted. We went under contract.
So there was no back and forth, nothing. There wasn't like a, hey, you're not the highest, so now there's a chance for a highest. No. Okay. And
maybe we were the highest, but maybe we weren't. And they liked the offer because we also put down a lot of earnest money. Like, who knows? We just got news within a day or two of a day or two of the offer deadline that we were under contract. And then to add to the like serendipity of it, Kyle, again, she has like a nose for finding helpful things related to this property. I don't know what her Google search terms were. I think maybe we knew from the property disclosures, we knew the names of the sellers. And she found this Vimeo video that the seller, the husband, had filmed for his students. So that the couple who owned it were Portland Public School teachers. Oh my God. They were peak COVID. He had come up with like a creative way to still have meaningful lessons for his kids who couldn't go out and do field work. He did like, it sounds like a mixture of carpentry, architecture, sustainability. And he had filmed this video that wasn't like, here's our home. It was like, here's an eco-friendly home. What does carbon neutral design look like? How can you design a home to be super sustainable and efficient? And it's like, this is the dude walking through the home we just saw and went under contract for, explaining in even more detail all the things that we already love about it.
And did you know it was as eco-friendly as it was, or did you learn that from the video?
We knew from the listing, like, insulated foundation, heat pumps, wood stove, secondary heat source. Like we knew kind of like the broad strokes, but then like that video definitely was like, oh snap, this is way more well thought than this is the guy. Clearly he's talking about it not as his own home, but we know that it is, and we know that he
Yeah.
designed it intentionally this way, and like that made it feel so much more special and clearly well thought out. And it turns out, because after we closed and we had his contact info, we dug in a little more, and he's like, yeah, I designed the home. My friend's a builder. He let me be the general contractor. So he GC'd it from a tent on the property with his dog, like literally slept in a tent during, maybe not every day, but like many nights of that summer.
Yeah.
As they saw, as they felled trees, milled the lumber with the local, lumberyard here, and built the place. So
I feel like we need to have him on the podcast.
you should. We've been talking about, we need to invite him to come up and have a stay here.
Yeah, you should. Have you been in touch with him at all since you closed on it?
A little bit, yeah. Like we're like, hey, what color stain did you use? Because we have to, like after however many years, we're going to need to restain this.
It's tricky to think about staying in touch with previous owners, because as someone selling a house now, we're selling it to our tenants who we love and it's just the right fit. But part of me is like, if anything goes wrong in the future, are they they're in we've been their landlord for like 3 years. Are they going to come to us and be like, well, we own it now. What happened here? Like anything that goes wrong is
totally,
like, it's a little risky.
And you can see why, for that reason, that usually like the direct personal contact info exchange doesn't happen, or doesn't always happen. I think it's deliberate, but we've tried to be really respectful. We're not hitting him up all the time. It's just like, if anything, knowing how much he loved and like cared for the building.
Yes.
It's like when we have done a big upgrade, like we brought in a bunch of local cedar mulch and like had 2 different local furniture makers make Adirondack chairs, and we stain. So we're like, hey, what's up, Gus? Just wanted to share this cool like upgrade we did, and like send photos. And he's like fired up and so happy to see that we like care about it and are continually trying to improve.
That is a unique house situation where he designed it and was so involved in building it that actually I feel like, and that's a little bit how I feel about my house too, because I gutted it and renovated it and it was my first home. So I actually would like to hear from them as they make changes to it.
Totally. You feel pride in it.
That's right. And that you picked the right people, it is a big decision selling a house, one, to sell or not to sell, and then who do you sell it to? And so then to see them care about it in the same way that you did probably means a lot to him.
I think so. Like the legacy of the building,
Yeah, for sure. There's an Instagram account I follow, and she had a whole series of reels that was like letters to the man who built this house, or questions for the man who built this house. And it's a whole series of like, why is there a plug right here?
Oh, we have so many of those in Portland.
Right. And so then she posted them on Instagram and they went viral, and she has since met the man and he came over for dinner, and now she's posting answers from the man who built the house. And it's so funny to hear how intentional a lot of the choices are. They seem crazy to you, the second homeowner, because you are living in that house in a different way than they were. But they made these really intentional choices, and just understanding the why behind it is like actually really endearing to hear about.
That's awesome. What a good like treasure hunt to find the guy.
Yes, I know. I don't know how that happened, but I just saw a follow-up to one of them that was like answers from the man who built the house. And I was like, what? She found the man. I love this.
So awesome.
These are the things I like on the internet. Okay, I do want to talk a bit about eco, because I feel like especially in the cabin space, there's 2 words that I see a lot, which is, well, this is 2 and then another one, but like off-grid and like eco-friendly. And I think those things both, I mean, off-grid, there's probably a definitive, yes, it's off-grid, or no, it's off-grid, right? Not off-grid. But there also is like this spectrum. Like some people will say off grid because they have solar power, but it's not fully off grid. Like, how do you all think about that with your place, which seems so intentionally eco-minded? What are the pieces there that if someone wants to create an eco-friendly cabin that they should be thinking about?
I think the biggest thing is you cannot reverse engineer energy efficiency. You can only like slap band-aids on a poorly insulated or like if you're talking about people who are building from scratch. The only way to have a truly energy efficient and eventually eco-friendly home is like the envelope of the building needs to be built that way. So like a full poured foundation that's also insulated, like thick exterior wall insulation, and intentional, passive heating from windows, like all of the design of where the light comes in, how the heat stays in. and then supplementing that with like, what's the heat source? Heat pumps are incredible, like a mini split, awesome, reliable heating in the winter, great AC in the summer, wood stove as backup. Like those are that kind of, especially for colder climates, like the heat pump for everything except miserably cold temperature, plus the wood stove for those really cold times, or just when you want the extra ambiance. Like it's awesome.
Always.
And right. And if the source of electricity is green, then like we have community solar. So that's a nice thing to know, is many states have subsidized community solar, where even if you can't put panels on your own property, Maine has an awesome system where you can pay and basically be like a shareholder in a solar farm, and you pay into their grid and you get credits back towards your bill. So we save like 15% per month towards our CMP bill. We have,
I did not know about
yeah,
this.
it's awesome. It honestly,
It's
the
through
initial
CMP?
pitch, it's through like a third party. And the first pitch sounded like a scam. They're like, sign up for solar and save money on your bill, and like, you don't have to install panels. We're like, sounds kind of too good to be true.
Right. Like, how does this work?
But yeah, 4 years in, we're signed up for each of our properties, and I think
Can you send me info on that?
Yeah, for sure. It's awesome.
Because everything you just said about how it's built, I'm like, yes, we did this, we did this, we
Mhm,
did this. So does that make our cabin eco-friendly? But then I think about our electric bill and how much electricity we consume per month.
Sure.
And I'm like, I don't care how many other things we did right. We're paying $400 a month in electricity. We're clearly not eco-friendly.
And
but if it were solar,
right. And if your grid is not green, then your house is not green, unless your source is solar. So I'll send you the info. It's great. And we save money, like objectively, we get a discount, but it's also, and there's good transparency around the solar farms that the energy is coming from. Like when we signed up this property, we expected it would be part of the same, I think, Belfast solar array. And they're like, no, that one's already fully at capacity, but we've built this new installation in, I forget the town, but it's like, they treat it like a farm with CSA shares. And once it's at capacity and generating that amount that's already spoken for by its clients, then they have to move on to the next one.
But then that demand tells them how many people want this, and it forces them to build more, and then pulls demand from the regular grid.
Yes. Yeah, it's a pretty great system. So because of that, in our home, heat pump plus and wood-fired heat is considered carbon neutral, because that carbon has already been, affixed from the atmosphere, and now you're re-releasing it.
And the thing about that is what we found at our cabin, because ours is not, it's about the same size as yours. We're 800 square feet.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's built tight, which ours was built super tight, the foundation was insulated, we have ERVs in it. In the middle of the winter, sometimes if we have that wood stove going, all day, we will end up opening windows because it's so tight in there. The wood stove will do it. We don't run the heat for days at a time. And I'm talking below freezing February. This happens.
Totally. No, we have, that's a common experience here, where we also just love to make a fire, and then the fire's ripping, and then you're like, it is 80 degrees in here. Like everyone's sweating. We're opening windows. But
John's like, I should turn
about it. Yeah.
Right. I should put the fire out. And I'm like, nope.
Yeah, totally. It's like last night I was working upstairs and just took my shirt off because I was sweating so much. But like
the lofts are the worst when that happens.
Yes. Yeah.
All the heat goes there. Okay. I like what you said about it has to start with the structure, but then we're moving in with where the electricity comes from. So keep going from there.
What are the systems? I think the biggest mistake people make is like, or not mistake, but that sounds judgy. If you install like natural gas infrastructure, you're just guaranteeing that there's going to be like a hydrocarbon source forever. If you're somewhere that there's like a natural gas, say like municipal grid to tap into. So if you can skip that step, that's great. We do have bottled propane, which only works for the cooktop, like the range, and our hot water. So that's, in our case, the only non-carbon neutral thing, and it's a small part of the total footprint. It'd be cool to not have even the propane. But to us, it feels like that's why we don't call it true carbon neutral. It's like almost carbon neutral.
Yeah.
But that considering we're in a place that often can lose electricity,
Yeah.
and we have guests who were responsible for like having that fail safe of knowing that you can still make hot water and can still like cook even if the electricity's out, feels like an important like survivability, like cabin in the
Yeah.
woods factor.
Yeah.
So
Because you have the wood stove too. So heat, you can produce
right, yeah,
that.
yeah,
Then to be able to have something to cook on, it takes care of a lot of the most basic human needs that for a day or two you would be able to survive.
for sure. Yep. So um and I think knowing how carefully the builders thought about I think they would have preferred 100% carbon neutral, but they built it deliberately, and I think that's the reason why, because it
Yeah.
is in the woods and like trees fall
Yeah.
on electrical lines. So
Yeah. Do you all have a generator?
we don't. I think that's probably like down the road, next, bigger investment we would
Because
make,
they're
but
expensive. We
they're
didn't do it
expensive.
initially, but we're having someone come out next week when we're up because I'm like, it might be time.
Yeah, so far we have not had any huge interruptions. We've had a few prolonged power outages, but like guests were pretty stoked.
Yeah.
Like hot, like plenty of drinking water, hot,
Yeah.
fire in the wood stove. But I think if money were no object, it would be easy. And even with money as an unfortunate object, like probably worth doing in
Yeah.
the, I don't know, next year or two.
Yeah. Okay, now imagine you're a cabin owner who the cabin's already been built. You can't fix some of those bigger things. They already are the way they are. Are there any other significant things that someone could do to make their cabin more green, considering that they're not building from scratch?
Yeah, I mean, I think most states, I know in Maine, there's like Efficiency Maine is a nice, well-funded government program where you can basically hire them to come in and do an audit and be like, all right, we could spray foam like the interior basement. We could add, they can recommend or kind of spell out the costs of improving whatever kind of tack on efficiency upgrades you can do.
Hmm.
I think the cool thing with heat pumps, mini splits, you can always add them. So like easiest way to drastically increase the sustainability of a home would be like turn off the oil boiler or furnace, or use it as backup only, and pivot to heat pumps where you're just using electricity, especially if it's solar. Like that's probably the biggest carbon footprint improvement you can make. Doesn't need to be original to the building. And then, I mean, I think this feels more like surface level, but we really care about eliminating single-use plastics, eliminating lots of Amazon shipments. So like we refill. We have an awesome spot in Portland called Go Refill. So like shampoo, conditioner, body wash, hand soap, like everything cleaning and toiletries that we can, we refill in like bulk and then replenish up here. We provide the like non-bleached paper towels, but we also have a hopefully not too preachy sign that's like consider using these rags instead, because we can
Yeah.
wash and reuse them.
Right.
So all of those, providing recycling and composting to guests, I think those are all important, maybe smaller impact in the grand scheme of things, but at least limiting waste.
Yeah. Can you talk to me quickly about how you do compost in a rental that you're not near? How
Yeah.
is that? How do you manage that?
Well, the guests make it easy because most people are still scared to compost or don't know about it. So like we make it available. A lot of guests don't use it, but the ones who do, we just have a tumbler outside behind our shed. We have a little kind of like receptacle on the kitchen counter that's labeled. And then if we just says, compost bin behind the shed. So then if they use it and they can bring it out,
Huh.
we haven't had any issues with pests. It's like a sealed container.
Right.
No hungry bears yet. We
Yeah.
will end up using it as soil in our garden. So
And for anyone who
it's
composts at home, they're familiar with exactly how that works.
totally.
Maybe in my mind, I'm thinking it's trickier if you're requiring everyone to use it and they're like, compost bin,
No,
what
totally
do I do?
optional. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of people don't even apparently, this is one of the things that makes you cynical as a host. Like, apparently, some people don't know that recycling exists because even with two
Oh, yeah.
separate bins that are
Yes.
labeled, it's like they all go in the same trash can.
Yes.
So we're just trying to make it available to people who are either already interested or willing to consider it versus like mandating it. And knowing we just always try to think about our perspective. If we're guests somewhere and they happen to have compost, like I stayed in an Airbnb in Vermont last winter, they composted and I was stoked. I was like, this
Yeah.
improves my experience and my perception of the host. They care, they're making it available to me. I'm totally going to opt in,
Mm.
but it wouldn't affect me if I chose not to opt into that.
This is so good to hear because I've gone through various phases of my life, like one entirely plastic free, like I will
Mm-hmm.
buy everything in bulk and reusable bags, and the pendulum shifts over time. And with hosting, I found it really intimidating to be super green
Mm-hmm.
because of what you're saying about guests. And this is a really good push for me to think about what are the ways. The
Awesome.
house build is really green, but I don't do a lot other than that to make it more green. But some of these feel doable.
Yeah, and I mean there's a reason that so much of our like society is based around single use everything because it is convenient and it is
That's right.
clean, you know. But I think we found the ways that are not Herculean effort. You know, it's just maybe a little extra effort if at all. And we still do provide. You know, there are still paper towels, but they're the green one. You know, they're the non-dyed, eco-friendly ones, and they're under the sink instead of on the counter. So like,
Hey, see, I could do
you
that.
know,
Put out more rags. That's not that
yeah,
hard.
more dish towels, rags next to the paper towels that are labeled. You know, it's like
Yeah.
kind of nudging people rather than forcing it.
Because a lot
Just,
of people, I think what you said about making you cynical about guests, I think that's really interesting because as hosts, normally in our everyday life, my husband and I talk about this sometimes, like we don't see many people's houses. You go to your family
mhm,
members'
yeah,
houses and occasionally friends invite you over, but more often than not, you meet out, right? And so you just don't see the way other people live very often or the small choices they make on the day to day. So we kind of are siloed into what we do
sure,
is just what we think everybody does. And when you host, especially if you're cleaning your own property, you are seeing how other people live, how much trash they produce in one stay, whether or not they separate recycling, how much of that trash is paper towels, how many of those rags are dirty or left unused, right? You're observing how people live in a space, which will make you cynical and also just open your eyes potentially to like, wow, only 25% of our guests actually recycle. That is shocking. And
yeah,
information about society as a whole, because that's a representation of like what's happening in other houses that we often don't know about.
right. And the other thing that makes it more revealing is like it's in a space where there's no barrier. It's not like we're charging for recycling.
Right.
We're not only providing like when we go to on the flip side as a like portal into the mindset of a host. If we go somewhere and they only provide trash and no recycling, we're like, what the heck? Like, do you not
Yeah.
care?
Yeah.
Why won't you? So if you're not providing us the opportunity to recycle and definitely not compost, then that's times however many guests you have per year every year that like all that's just going in the trash. Like it's pretty
Yeah.
disappointing. So I think not to say there's a responsibility, but the impact you can have as a host by just like
That's right.
enabling people to make the more responsible choice is pretty big.
It's a
Um,
huge opportunity. I like how
yeah,
you said it's, I mean, maybe I think we're going to have to get to this point as a country where, and Maine does this, they charge for bags. If you go to the
right.
grocery store and you don't bring a bag, they charge you for one. And coming from North Carolina, that is not at all what we do. They'll bag up your groceries and double
Hmm.
bag it where it's unnecessary. Like it's just out of control, right? And I love that they do that because it's that nudge where, like, you know what? I know better than to not bring my own bag to the store, but you're kind of forcing me to make that choice.
Yep.
And I think the government's going to have to step in and do that. Like we're seeing what climate change is doing and how we're impacting the earth. So like for the government or as a rental owner, like how can you say what opportunities do I have here to nudge people in that direction? So we bought a giant bean bag and we hang it up for guests so that they have a bag to take to the grocery store and not have
Mhm.
to use or pay for the bags there, but here's one that you can
Totally.
take.
Yeah, that's the same thing. We have like reusable shopping bag, like a little cooler, just obvious right where you walk in, just so that like it's convenient, but also hopefully helps them if they are gonna probably go to the grocery store and need bags. So like,
Yeah.
and in Portland they do pay as you throw trash. It's kind of like turbocharged version of that, where it's I
Hmm.
think $1 or $2 per, depending on the size, per trash
Hmm.
bag, and that's been proven to be really effective in reducing total trash output because it's just annoying and expensive enough that people who maybe weren't recycling will like think about diverting the recyclables, or if they weren't composting, like we honestly take our compost out all the time in Portland. We take our recycling out pretty often. We take our trash out like every 3 weeks because it never fills up.
Because when you're composting and recycling, that is such a large portion of your
For
trash that you
sure.
don't realize until you start doing those things.
Right. And there's no penalty. We don't pay to recycle. We don't pay to compost. We do pay for trash bags. So it's
Right.
also like if people complain about the cost of trash bags, there's like an easy solution. It's just use less of them.
Right.
Um,
And not to get
so
political, but I feel like that is the job of our government, is to, in some
yeah,
cases, protect us from ourselves. We will err on the side of convenience or what's easiest, or a lot of us will. And sometimes the government has to step in and be like, okay, I hear you. That's human instinct. I feel the same way. But as a government, we have to protect our towns. We
yeah,
have to protect our state and our earth. And this is one way that we know definitively we can do that. So I
yeah.
think, oh, go ahead.
No, I just think. I mean, I was in an econ major, which was really cool, but also I think also makes you more cynical because like over the course of time, the only thing that's ever predicted people's behavior uh, reliably is money. Like there are
Mhm.
all these studies that they go in with assumptions of like, oh, we assume everyone will want this better outcome and will act in this way. And it's like, nope, they'll do that if you like, yes, there are some people who will do it for that reason alone. But unless there's a financial penalty for the behavior you don't want and a
Right.
financial incentive for the behavior you do want, like you're never gonna move people in the right direction. And like, yeah, government is the only way to kind of meter that out.
Right. And it feels a little disheartening to hear that, but then it's like, because I also majored in econ, so I have read probably a lot of those same things, and I felt at times disheartened, and then I was just like, nope, okay, this is kind of empowering because we know there's something that will move behavior, and we know what that thing
Absolutely.
is. So if we want to make change, this is how we do it.
Totally. Yeah, it's not rocket science. It's like there's gas costs a ton of money in Europe. People don't drive huge trucks. It's like
That's
you'd be
right.
stupid to, or really rich to do that. But then they
Right.
also have, high speed rail and viable alternatives. So
Right.
it's never just a single solution. If we just made gas really expensive here without doing other improvements, like people would have a good reason to be mad.
That's right. That's right. It has to be thoughtful and well-rounded, I feel like. And so I think my homework for this episode for everyone, which I've never given homework before though, because I'm certainly going to be doing this, is like analyzing your own cabin. And for a lot of us, that's a rental, and thinking through what are the small areas that I could make it a little bit more intentional when it comes to being green or environmentally friendly. And even just think about, and I'm going to do this when I'm up next week, is looking around the cabin and all the choices I've made for supplies that we're providing or things that we're doing. What messages are those choices sending?
Mhm.
Because I think no matter what choice you're making, it is sending a message, to your point. And so not having compost is sending a message to our guests. Not having rags available to clean up and only having paper towels is
Mhm.
sending a message. So what are some ways that I can shift the messaging in terms of the choices that we're making around our cabin?
Totally. Yeah. And I think we've kind of, it's hard because I've like coming up with the whole listing on Airbnb and the Instagram presence and um, how much to preach about that. I think we've leaned towards like not being super vocal, but just mentioning like that it's eco-friendly. We don't want to have I don't know. We don't want to have it overwhelm the experience, but we want to make it as just know that we're providing the greenest
Yeah.
experience that we can without having someone come in and feel like they're being yelled at by like
Right.
someone, a tree hugger outside who's like, don't you dare throw that in the trash. Like
Yes. Yes.
It's a hard balance.
It is so hard. I was vegan for 8 years, and the most challenging part of it was not avoiding cheese or avoiding meat. The hardest part was at every meal having to explain why I was vegan and do it in a way that doesn't make me a typical vegan who's lecturing.
Right.
Because I never wanted to talk about it, but at every meal, someone would be like, so why are you vegan? And then all of a sudden, here we are again, while you're eating your meat, I'm having to explain these choices. So that balance of making the choice that you think is right and not being preachy to other people is so challenging.
Totally. And sadly, sustainability is like become such a politically polarized topic that I think we just want to like lean into the consume less mantra that I think everyone can get behind, regardless of their political affiliation.
Yeah.
Like if you make less waste, I think everyone agrees that's good. So try and do that.
Right. So we'll just set up our cabin in a way that supports that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mike, this was great. Thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. If you have any, I'll send you some follow-up stuff on the efficiency and solar stuff we talked about too.
Absolutely. And we're going to put all your contact info in the show notes, but why don't you tell people real quick where they can find you?
Sure. We're on Instagram at Kingfield Chalet. And our Airbnb listing, I think it's airbnb.com/h/Kingfield Chalet, keeping it simple. Those are the two best places to catch us. And that's where Instagram's where we put out our updates. Feel free to shoot us a DM. And
perfect.
Yeah, we have some foliage photos and winter calendar coming out. So
I was just wondering how beautiful it's about to be up there. Our fingers are crossed that next week is going to be a good week. But honestly, anytime in the fall, you can't go wrong. Even in November when the leaves are gone, I'm still happy up there. I feel like fall is perfect. And happy almost snowboard season.
Thank you. Yeah, the beech trees keep their yellow color super long and get us basically into winter season. So it's a good bridge.
Yeah. Well, it's great to meet you.
Yes, you too, Janice. Thanks so much for the time.
Thanks so much for joining us, and if you liked what you heard, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or share some of your favorite parts over on Apple Podcast. If you have feedback or suggestions for the future, you can also find me on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin. Looking forward to next week.